when I was just a teenager, I didn't have anybody to tell me or help me. It was always just, I just did whatever I wanted. I was a drug addict. I grew up in a dysfunctional home. I was in a broken relationship. I didn't know any better. But the moment I gave my life to Christ is when it all changed. I grew up in a home on the outside where it looked like the Brady Bunch, but on the inside there was a lot going on that really nobody knew about. Things that as a child you shouldn't see. We lived in Fullerton till I was about 18, and then we moved to the high desert. My mom bought a house there with my dad, my stepdad, and everything was okay, but I had grown up in Fullerton my whole life, and that's really all I knew. So growing up or going there was a big change. So me and my older sister, we would venture back down here, and we just kind of felt more comfortable here. Moving from Fullerton to Victorville, again, it was a big change. So I had a grandmom who lived in Norwalk. So I would always come down to her house whenever I could escape being in Victorville. And I had two cousins that we were as thick as thieves. And we started to just run the streets of Norwalk and just be all kinds of crazy. At the age of 15, my cousin introduced me to meth. I remember walking into her bedroom one day, and her and a friend of ours, we were smoking it. And I had asked her, you know, well, what are you doing? And she had said, well, it's just, it's meth. And I had no idea at the time what that was. I had been exposed to, you know, marijuana and beer and stuff like that, but never anything hard like that. And I had asked her, what does it do to you? And she said, nothing, it just gives you energy. You should try it. And being curious as I was a very rebellious teenager, so this is just like something else that I was gonna do, I was gonna try. And I tried it and immediately was hooked. It was like the best feeling that I had had. It was an escape from things that I was going through, and I just wanted more. And so I kept doing it. But because I was young and I still live with my parents, I couldn't do it as often as I would like. So I would hide it, and I would sneak out sometimes and, you know, hide it in my closet and be up for hours of the night, and nobody knew because I would be hiding it, or in my bathroom, like letting the steam fill the bathroom so nobody knew what I was doing. And from the age of 15 to like 24, I was addicted heavily to meth. For a good solid year, I smoked crack, which I mean, it is like the most embarrassing thing for me to even say. But I just remember being in a room with a bunch of drug addicts and thinking to myself, how did I get here? How did I get here? I grew up, and my life as a teenager and as a child wasn't the greatest, but I had a very privileged life. I got everything that I wanted. My mom worked really hard, you know, to give us everything that we wanted. I lived in Fullerton, one of the nicest neighborhoods in Fullerton. I didn't know any of this stuff. I wasn't exposed to it. So I thought to myself, how did I end up here? How did I get here? And I just remember seeing everybody fighting over drugs, you know, and I thought to myself, like, I don't want to do that anymore. But it didn't stop me from doing it. I just knew that inside of me something was crying out, like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I just remember being in LA at 2 o'clock in the morning, driving around, being in clubs that I shouldn't even be in, and just thinking, like, this is my life. This is who I am. You know, I had no relationship with my family, no relationship with my sisters. I could really care less about anybody at that point. It was all about me. It was all about the next high. And I remember driving in my car several times, getting high in my car while I'm driving, and cops were everywhere. And I thought, like, okay, I'm gonna get caught. I'm gonna go to jail. And it never happened. I remember putting myself in positions where I could have been taken advantage of, or I could have died. Seeing people overdosing in places and really having no emotion towards those people at all. Because I was so high, I didn't understand, like, the severity of it. I just thought, whatever, that's their thing. I was this rebellious teenager that had a lot of anger and just a lot of resentment towards my parents for things that I saw, things that I went through, things as a child, you know, you shouldn't see. And so my escape was to defy my mother and do everything that I could to make her feel what I was feeling. And wow, that's the first time I ever said that. And that was where I wanted to do it. I wanted to drink. I wanted to make her feel bad. And sorry. So that was my escape. And then from the time I met John to probably so I met John at 19. And again, we were just terrible. He was worse off than I was, and together we were terrible. So from 19 to about 23, 24-ish, we ran amok. We just did whatever we wanted, drugs, beer, going out, spending money. And it was reckless. It was super reckless. We would spend his income tax. We would get super high and then say, let's go to Pachanga and blow your income tax. And we would. It was just a reckless life. One day we're at John's softball game. And after, he came to me and he said, I'm tired. I don't want to do drugs anymore. And I was shocked because we had been doing it for years. And I wasn't ready to quit. I didn't want to. I told him, you could do whatever you want, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not following you. I still want to do drugs. And he told me, if you don't quit, then we will not be together. Being in a relationship with somebody for so long, that was really all I knew at that point. So I was just like, okay, I'm on board. Fine, let's do it. And it took us 2 weeks of hell to get clean. 2 weeks of fighting, 2 weeks of yelling at each other, 2 weeks of sweating and dying inside because we were so addicted. But once that was done, the drugs, it turned to alcohol. We moved out together. We had an apartment together. We ended up getting married. And in our first year of marriage was hell. I did not want to be married. I wanted to get an annulment. He was always drunk. Even if he had to go to work, he was hungover. There was nights that he would sleep on the floor in the living room because he couldn't remember where his bed was. I just remember in those moments thinking, well, if he's gonna do it, I'm gonna do it too. I would go out with my friend at the time. We had her husband was doing the same thing as John, so we kind of cleaned together and we would go out every night. We'd go Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, whenever there was a club or a bar open, we would go out and we would drink. And if he didn't care, I didn't care. It was like that for a year, a full ugly year, to the point of where I was finally done. And I told him I want to get a divorce. We were arguing because he was drunk and he wanted more alcohol, and we had one bottle that we had gotten from our wedding. And he went in the kitchen and he was gonna pour himself a drink, and I slapped it out of his hand, and he was yelling at me so bad that he kind of pushed me into a corner, and my little sisters were crying because they thought he was hitting me. And I remember thinking to myself, this is it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm done. I want to be done completely with him. I want to be done completely with drinking. I want to be done with this life. But I was so ingrained in it that I didn't know anything else. At this time, my older sister was going to church. And I remember calling her crying several times and telling her, like, I'm done, I can't do this, he's this, he's that. And she would tell me, you need to pray. And I used to think, like, okay, like, pray, what's that gonna do? And I would do it though. I would pray, I would sit, and I didn't know how to pray. I just would talk to the sky, like, hey, if you're up there, you know, I need help. I knew there was a God. I knew that there was a higher power. I always knew that. My mom instilled that in us. But did I know how to lean on him? Absolutely not. I didn't know any of that stuff. There was no understanding. There was no, hey, this is who you call for help in time of need. This, you know, prayer is vital. There was none of that. It was just, you should pray. And I thought, yeah, okay, whatever, I'll do it. And it didn't work. It didn't work. Things didn't change. He didn't change overnight. Things were getting worse, if anything. He was an embarrassment to me, and I wanted nothing to do with him. I remember sitting in my kitchen with a cousin, and we were drinking, and John had come in and told me, hey, I'm gonna go to church. And I just kind of laughed at him like, sure, okay. And he came home that night and he said, oh, I got saved. And I had no idea what that meant. I was like, okay, saved from what? You know, like, what does that even mean? My 25th birthday was that Sunday. And he says, I want to take you to church. And I thought, I'm not going to church, not going to happen. His friends from work had called and said, hey, Jen, it's your birthday. Let's go out, drinks on me. And I thought, that's where I want to be. I don't want to be in church. No way, no how, I'm not going to do it. But he kept begging me, please, please come. And so I finally came, and I hated it. I hated the church. I hated how small it was. I didn't like people that were hugging me. I didn't like it at all. And so I had told him that I don't like it. I don't want to go back. But something in him was different. I saw it. I didn't want to acknowledge it, but I saw it. He stopped drinking. He stopped smoking. He stopped cussing, all within the weekend. And I thought, let me just wait. Let me just wait to see exactly how he's gonna be. Because he said he was going to Bible study, then he got drunk. So let's wait. And he continued. He kept being that person. He kept going to church. He kept being nice. And I still wanted nothing to do with it. Nothing. I had no plans of going to church. I had no plans of being married. Like, I was already done. There was years and years and years of hurt that I just couldn't get over. Coming into 2010, he's still asking me to go to church. I'm still going. I hate it, but I'm going. And I even went to Bible study with him. He started asking me to go. I was like, fine, I'll go. The only reason I did that was because I could see something was different. But I still was leery, and I still needed to see if he was really the person that he said he was. All the while he's changing, he's becoming this great person that people see him now to be, which he still is. But for me, I just knew who he was, and I knew what he was capable of, that I couldn't see past the good person that he was becoming. I just kept seeing the old person that he was. I had tons of bitterness towards him, tons of resentment, things that I held on for years, even after I got saved, that I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, because I thought something's gonna happen and he's gonna change. It was hard because people saw him and how great he was, and then there was me. And I wasn't on board fully like he was. And so I felt like the expectation for me to be like him was so high that it kind of made me feel like, oh, I need to take a step back. And his expectation of me was so high. It was, if the church is open, we're there. And I was just like, okay, you could be there, but I'm gonna just be here. It's about February, and I remember being in service, and I remember clearly, and I didn't know it was the Holy Spirit at the time, but something clearly was pulling me to the altar, pulling me, telling me that, hey, this is what you've been praying for. Even if it's that little tiny prayer that you're looking up to the sky and saying, hey, I need help. Something was saying, this is what you wanted. You're either in or you're out. You can't be both. And I just remember feeling it in my heart, like, what is this? Like, why am I feeling like this? And I remember going to the altar, I was crying. And our Bible study leader at the time, she prayed for me, and she was constantly on top of me to open up, to be, to be receptive to what was going on. And so that day it came, and after that I kind of eased up a little bit. I was a little bit more soft. I allowed people to hug me, even though I still was like, please don't touch me, you're in my space. After that, it was like full force. It was when I got on the roller coaster with him, we took off very quickly. About a year or so into being saved, John and I became the young adult leaders. Pastor Omar had come to us and asked us if we would be up for the challenge, because there was no young adult group. But I was still young, and I wanted to get a connection with younger people. So for me, I was all on board. I was like, yes, let's do it. So we did that. We did that for about 2-3 years. We held it right here in Praise Chapel Paramount in the cafe at the time, and it was cool. We had about 12 people, 12 young adults, and then after about 3 years, they asked us to be Bible study leaders, to transition into having a Bible study, and that was new for me, because that was couples, that was different problems. It was not just, hey, I can't pay for college. This is like, hey, I can't pay my mortgage. A lot of the couples that we were probably going to meet, because at the time there was nobody for our Bible study. It was just, hey, John, Jen, you guys want to be Bible study leaders? You have to grab your own people. And we were like, oh, okay. But I was very scared because a lot of the couples had worse marriages, or they had different stories, things that I had never been through, that I didn't know how to relate to that. So it was very hard for me, because how was I going to speak to an older woman who'd been married for 20, 30 years? How am I going to speak into her life? How am I going to help her? How am I going to help somebody who's had adultery? I didn't know that avenue. I had no idea what to do. And I just remember the first day that we were going to do Bible study, that I thought nobody's going to show up. Nobody. And we were just hoping for the best. And that night, 18 people showed up. 18 people. And I thought, wow, we must be doing something. If it's not me, it's John for sure. You know, he must be doing something, you know? And, but together we were doing something. We were showing something. The Lord was using us for something. And I just remember sitting in a group of women and them talking. And some had been saved, some weren't, some were new. And I just thought, like, the only thing I can lend to them is prayer. The only thing I could do for them is love them. That's really all I can do, and be a listening ear. And it's, I don't even know how many years later, and we're still doing it, and we're still loving on people. We're still teaching people and helping people, and people are helping us and teaching us. And this is one of the greatest decisions that I've ever made in my whole life. I've done a lot of bad things. I've done things I am not proud of. I've hurt a lot of people in my past. And I know that the Lord forgives. And I know that He's forgiven me for those things. I have grown tremendously from the young girl that I was when I first walked into Praise Chapel Paramount to now. I've asked for forgiveness, not only from the Lord, but from the people that I've hurt. And I just feel like the Lord can restore. There's relationships that were broken. Me and my mom, that is a big relationship that now is restored fully to more than I could ever even imagine. The relationship with my sisters, I didn't even see them grow up, but yet we have this beautiful relationship. They've forgiven me, I've forgiven me, the Lord has forgiven me, and that's really all I could ask for.